Right, shall we start? Yes, shall we start?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. So good morning again. So today we are going to discuss about the ethics, right? So basically, we have finished off the corporate governance discussion. So last 7 weeks we have spent to discuss about the corporate governance stuff, and on Sunday we are having the quiz. So I have already post the notice on the LMS. So you can see the notice and the instructions also given. And the quiz will be available from 9 to 10, right? 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. And for the 30 minutes quiz, you will be receiving 20 questions. And 20 marks will be allocated as the assessment marks. 20 marks will be allocated, right? All right, so with that, I'm moving on to the today's discussion. So today we are going to discuss about the professional ethics and the ethical issues we are having, right? So basically, when it's come to the professional ethics, because we all are professionals now, or sometimes we are to be professionals, right? In some day, so therefore we need to maintain our ethics, right? Maintain our ethics. So therefore, we have to know what are the professional ethics and the ethical issues we are having, right? Because when you come into the corporate governance, right? To have a kind of a good corporate governance, you need to have a good ethical background, right? Good ethical background. So that's why we are learning the ethics under this subject, right? So basically, here we are not going to discuss about the kind of a uh, traditional ethics, right? So today we are going to discuss about the professional ethics because our focus is on the professional context, right? Because we all know we are discussing about the corporate governance in the terms of the companies or the corporates, and the ethics also we are discussing in the terms of the companies, right? So therefore, that's why we are discussing the professional ethics and the ethical issues, right? So before moving to the detailed discussion, anyone knows what is the meaning of ethics? So forget about this professional thing. Without this professional thing, so what is the meaning of ethics? Yes. What do you mean by ethics?
Do the right thing.
Okay. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. Okay. Okay. Any other idea? Any other idea? Yes. Anyone else is having a different idea than this? Guys, please talk. Yes. Do the right thing. Okay.
Individual morals and principles.
Sorry. Individual
Morals and principles.
and principles. Okay. Good. So when it's come to the ethics, yes, we can say doing the right thing, right? So then next question is how we are identifying the right thing. How we are going to identify the right thing. So you are saying that the ethics is doing the right thing. The one idea is doing the right thing. So how we are identify the right things to do? How we are going to identify this is right and this is wrong? Yes. What are the sources? You can say
Legal framework.
frameworks. Okay, frameworks. Frameworks. Yeah. Any other idea?
The judgment.
Okay, judgment. Okay, judgment framework. Very good. Yes, any other idea? Anything else? Yeah. So you are correct, right? So when it's come to the ethics, right? Sometimes the ethical things are in the frameworks, ethical things are in the books, right? And we are judging this is right, right? If you feel like if you are having a kind of a principle that you are not doing this, so then you feel it right? According to your moral judgment, so you think this is right? So those are, we can call it as ethics, personal ethics, right? But when it comes to professional ethics, right? Professional ethics. So there are some documents to follow. There are some, we can say a framework or kind of a document which is emphasized. These are the professional ethics you have to follow when it comes to this profession, right? So therefore, when it comes to professional ethics in Sri Lanka, right? So basically for the accountants, right? So we need to follow the code of ethics, which is issued by CS Sri Lanka, right? Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, right? So our basic focus on this professional ethics, which has been issued by the ICA SL or Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, right? And when it comes to this ethics, right? So mainly ethics are code of moral principles that provides follow with respect to what is right or wrong, right? So we can say it's a moral principles. Moral principle means සදාචාරාත්මක විනිශ්චය කියලා කියනවා සිංහලෙන්. right? ඔයාට හිතනවා මේක මම මේ විදිහට හිටියොත් right? මම ethical person කෙනෙක්. මේවා තමයි මගේ ethics. right? සමහර කෙනෙක්ට හිතන්න පුළුවන් අනුන්ගේ සල්ලි හොරකම් කරන එකේ මගේ ethics කියලා. right? මං හිතන එක හරි කියලා. So according to that person, it can become ethics of that person, right? So therefore, when it's come to the professional ethics, there will be something like kind of a acceptance is there for a large number of people, right? But when it comes to ethics, we can say ethics are code of moral principles that provide follow with respect to what is right and wrong, right or wrong, right? So if you do this, it's right. If you not do this, something is wrong, right? Likewise. But more importantly, when it comes to ethics, it's not enforced by law. Right? It is not enforced by law, but law incorporates the moral judgment. Right? What do you mean by that? When it comes to the ethics, it is not enforced by the law. Law can enforce karana. But when it comes to law, it includes these moral judgments. Right? It includes these moral judgments. Right? So that is why you need to maintain the ethical behavior. Then only you can go for your company can go for a kind of a success, right? Because it is not enforced by law, but you need to incorporate that moral judgment in the law, right? So that is the basic meaning of ethics, right? So the next question is, do ethics change over time and the place? The first question is, do ethics change over time? That means if you look at the period before the 2000, whether it is the ethics in nowadays is changing when you are comparing with that period, right? Do ethics change over time? So my question is, do ethics change over time? Time එකත් එක්ක ethics වෙනස් වෙනවද? Yes, ethics වෙනස් වෙනවද? time එකත් එක්ක යද්දී ethics වෙනස් වෙනවා. වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. Yes. Can or can't?
Can be.
What are the examples?
Like self-interest traits, like
Self-interest.
yeah.
So what kind of example? If you elaborate it. Yeah. Yes, guys. Any other idea? Do ethics change over time, and what are the examples for that? Any examples? So one example is I can say uh, in Roman Empire, right? Right. The slavery they take it as right thing, right? Slavery එක ඒගොල්ලෝ අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම Roman Empire එකේ slavery කියන එක තිබ්බා. Right. Right. But when it's come to nowadays, what happened? In the world, the slavery is prohibited. Right? Slavery is prohibited. In the Roman Empire, they take it as right thing. But with the time being, right, that it will become a wrong thing. Right? So therefore, the ethics can be changed over time. Right? Ethics can be changed over time. Right? And for example, because of the technological factors, right, in before 2000 period, right, if you are taking the information of a person, it is not right. The personal information, if you are looking at the personal information of a people, it's a wrong thing. But with the technological advancements, now with the Facebook, now with the technology, right, now with the AI, right, and with the transformation of the technology, so now it will become a kind of a normal thing. Now the ethics has been changed, right? So therefore, ethics can be changed over time. Right? Ethics can be changed over time. Can ethics change with the place? Yes. Yes or no? The second question,
Yes.
do ethics change with the place? This means, let's say, when you're looking at the same country in Sri Lanka, right? In Jaffna, we are having a kind of a different ethics, right? In South, we are having a different ethics. In the middle of the country, we are having a different ethics. And also in different countries, they are having different ethics. Why? Because of the cultural factors, the ethics can be changed. Because of the people, the ethics can be changed. So therefore, you can understand. So what I want to highlight is when it comes to the ethics, right? Sometimes ethics are common to all. Sometimes the ethics can be differ with the people, right? So therefore, the ethics can be changed over time and place. So we are having two different approaches for the ethics. One is ethical relativism, right? That means ethics can be changed, right? Ethics can be changed. For example, when it comes to the meal preferences, right? දැන් අපි ගත්තොත් එහෙම අපි meats ගත්තොත් එහෙම right right සමහර religions වල meats කන්නම එපා කියනවා. සමහර religions වල මේ meat එක આવොත් හොඳයි කියනවා. අනික් එක කන්න එපා කියනවා. Right guys? So there are different factors are there. Different things are there. Right? Different viewpoints are there. Right? So we call it as ethical relativism. Right? Based on the situation, based on the culture, based on the religious, based on the place, based on the time, the ethics can be changed. Right? Ethics can be changed. Then the next concept is ethical absolutism. Right? It is absolute. Right? Never change. Right? Whether the time pass, the place is different, the ethics will not be changed. Right? For example, doing a murder. Right? Doing a murder. It's a wrong thing. It's a universal truth. Right? If you are doing a murder, it's not a ethical factor. Right? Universal truth. Right? So if it is a universal truth, that means it's common to all and it's not changing. It is absolute. Right? So in the second concept, we are discussing the ethics which will not be changed over time and the place. So we can't say ethics can be changed over time and place. We can't say yes or no. It will depend. Right? It will depend on the situation. Right? Right? It will depend. Sometimes yes, ethics can be changed over time and the place. Sometimes no, because we are having two different approaches, right? We are having two different approaches for two kind of things, right? Is it clear? Yeah, clear? Guys, any questions? Any criticisms? Are there? Yes, is it clear?
Clear, sir. Clear.
Yes, sir. All right. Right. So, actually, which we have discussed till now, I'm not going to test in your examination because I want to give you some kind of a background of the foundation for the ethics, right? So this point onwards, we are discussing the things this point onwards. I'm incorporating your exam paper, right? So in today's discussion, now you are having a kind of a understanding what you mean by ethics and how the ethics are behaving, right? So with that knowledge, I'm moving on to the today's discussion, right? So first of all, I will discuss about the Kohlberg's framework regarding the ethics. Then I'm moving on to the content of the professional codes, right? And we are going to discuss about the fundamental principles and ethical traits we are having, right? When we are doing something, when we are doing something, so we are having a kind of a fundamental principles to follow. And if you are not following the fundamental principles, you are getting some ethical traits, right? Sometimes people are not following the fundamental principles because of they are getting the threats, right? And ethical safeguards and the conceptual framework. So if there is a kind of a ethical threats is there, so what kind of safeguards we are having and what kind of a concept we need to follow to, let's say, overcome those kind of matters, right? Right. So if you remember, one time in the CA conference, so every year the CA conference is going on now, right? So in the CA conference, they have invited few politicians to the panel discussion, if you can remember, right? So they are most of the general public are actually shouting out for this. මොකද මේ චාර්ටර් එක වරලක් ගණකාධිකාරී ආයතනයේ මොකටද මේ politicians ලා ගෙන්නලා මේ බලන්නකො මේගොල්ලෝ කරන එක, right? Right. So they are shouting out, but actually as per my opinion, right, so that thing is very good because we can get the viewpoints of the leaders of the country. How? Because in Sri Lanka, the main job is to have the good governance in the country, right? With the financial reporting, with the ethical things, with the governance thing. That's why they are issuing things, issuing the guidelines, right? So getting a kind of a leaders to the conference and having their viewpoint is something very good, right? In there, one of the politicians, I'm not going to say the name, right? Right. Right? Right. So he said a good thing. Right? He said, without accountants or without the secretaries of the ministry, right? Minister can't alonely do the frauds. Right? Minister ඇමතිතුමාට කරන්න බෑ කිසිම වංචාවක් accountant ගෙනුයි අමාත්‍යංශ ලේකම් ගෙනුයි උදව් නැතු. Without the help of the accountant and the ministry secretary, so the secretary of the minister can't alone do anything. Right? So what is going to emphasize? Right? So professionals, right? Professionals are doing more frauds. We call it as, normally it's there in the world context as well. We call it as white collar crimes. Right? White collar crimes. Right? If you learn how to do the fraud, then you can easily do the fraud. Right? So without knowing how to do a fraud, you can't do a fraud. Right? ඔයා හොඳට ඉගෙනගෙන තියෙනවා නම් මිනිස්සු කොහොමද හොරකම් කරන්නේ කියලා. ඔයාට පුළුවන් හරියට හොරකම් කරන්න. මොකද ඔයා දන්නවා හොරකම් කරන්නේ කොහොමද කියලා. Right? ඔයා දන්නවා හොරකම් කරන්නේ කොහොමද කියලා. Right? ඒතර ඇයි ඔය දැන් මේ වෙඩි තියලා යන කට්ටිය කවදාවත් අහුවෙන්නේ නැත්තේ? ඔය පාරවල් වෙඩි තියලා යනවා නේ යහුවෙන්නේ නැත්තේ. ඒගොල්ලෝ දන්නවා ඒක හරියටම කරපන් කියලා. යා අහුවන කට්ටිය බලන්න ඔක්කොම ආමේකේ ඉන්න කට්ටිය. මොකද ඒගොල්ලෝ දන්නවා වැඩි. Right? So if you know how to do it, It's very difficult to capture as well. And also they are knowing how to do it correctly. So that's a good point that is coming from that conference. Right. So therefore, this ethical thing is very important, right? So let's say everyone is following the ethics. So then no need to have the law actually. හැමෝම ethical විදිහට ජීවත් වෙනවා මොකද? කිසිම law එකක් අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ නැහැ. Right. කිසිම law එකක් අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. I will tell you one example. So I have been there in Thailand, not for nothing like not for the enjoyment. I'm going there for a kind of a conference, right? So there, what I have noted is, right, the mama hotel එකේ යද්දී, right, hotel එකේ යද්දී පොඩි පාරක්. So only one vehicle can go there, right? Only one vehicle can go. So it's a very it's a tiny road, right? මම හොටෙලේ එළියට ඇවිල්ලා වාහනේ නැගලා යද්දී ඉස්සරහින් වාහනයක් නවත්තලා, right? බෑග් පටවනවා. right? වාහනේ අරලා උතුම් බෑග් පටවනවා. දැන් තාම හොටෙල් එක උඩින් නම් බෑග් කියනවා. මං ගිහපු වාහනේ ඩ්‍රයිවර් එක හෝන් එකක්වත් ගැහුවේ නැහැ. එයා බලන් හිටියා patiently ඒ වැඩේ ඉවරනේ. right? I have not that because they are not actually it's not only shouting. In Sri Lanka, what will happen if someone is doing like that? අපි මොකද කියන්නේ බයිනවනේ අනිවාර්යෙන්. දැන් මටත් අත්ත මේ වෙලාවේ කියන කියාව. මටත් වෙලා ගිහලා යන්නෙත් නැහැ. right? ඊපස්සේ මම ඒක පොඩ්ඩක් ආපහු නෝට් ඩවුන් කරා. ඒගොල්ලෝ පාරේ යද්දී කවදාවත් ෆෝන් එක ගහන්නේ නැහැ. right? මේන් රෝඩ් එක ගියා. අපි ගියොත් එම් ෆෝන් එක සමහර කට්ටිය ෆෝන් එක අතේ තියාගෙන ඉන්නේ. right? ෆෝන් එක උඩට නැගලා ඉන්නේ. ෆෝන් එක ගහන්නේ. ඒතර මොකද? දැන් අපි ලංකාවේ දැකලා තියෙනවනේ හොස්පිටල් ගහලා තියෙනවා ෆෝන් ගහන්න එපා කියන්නේ. ඒතර එහෙම ගහන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලෝ ethical behavior එක follow කරනවා. If there's ethics, so you don't want to go to you don't want to have law. Everyone in this world have good ethics, right? So you don't want to have law, right? Right. So that's why we need to develop the ethics. That's why we need to have a framework to develop the ethics, right? Right. That's why the CS Sri Lanka is providing a professional ethics to the professional, right? So otherwise, even you are become a chartered accountant, right? Right. If the CS Sri Lanka not issue the professional guides, professional ethics, right? So you can do whatever you want, right? By using a chartered what do you call it? Chartered badge or chartered accountant badge. So that is why the professional ethics should be there, right? So with that, I'm moving on to the firstly for the theoretical part, right? So Kohlberg stages of moral development. So Kohlberg has been issued a kind of stages how we developed our moral, right? How we develop our let's say the norms, let's say our how we are behaving, right, with the time being, right? So he has developed these stages into 3 categories, right? The first one is pre-conventional age, which is from 3 years to 7 years, right? And conversional age 8 to 13 years, and the first post-conversional year, that means after you have become adults, right? Adults, right? So in the pre-conventional period, right? So you are following the right thing as, if think about you in 3 years time, right? අවුරුදු 3 දී මතක් කළා බලන්න. ඔයාලා හරි කියලා හිතන්නේ මොනවද? සාමාන්‍ය අවුරුදු 3 දී ඔයාලා හරි කියලා හිතන්න බෑ. පොඩි කාලෙදී අපි අවුරුදු 3 මතක් කරමු. පොඩිම කාලෙදී සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඕගොල්ලෝ හරි කියලා හිතන්නේ මොනවද? ethics කියලා හිතන්නේ මොනවද කියලා හිතුව? ethics කියලා හිතන්නේ නැහැ පොඩි කාලේ. ඔයා හරි කියලා හිතන්නේ මොනවද? සාමාන්‍ය. yes. පොඩි කාලෙදී මොනවද හරි කියලා හිතන්නේ? පොඩි ළමෙක් ගත්තොත් එයා හරි කියලා මේක කරොත් හරි මේක කරන එක හොඳ නැහැ. මේක කරන එක හොඳයි කියලා එයා කොහොමද තීරණය කරන්නේ?
බඩින එකේ
sorry
අම්මගේ බැනුම් අහන්න නැතුව ඉන්න එක
right
හොඳයි.
very good.
බැනුම් අහනවත් හොඳයි.
One is avoiding punishments. Right. Very correct. Good. Right. අම්මා කියන එක තමයි හරි කියලා හිතන්නේ. හරි. අම්මෙන් ගුටි ගන්න නැතුව ඉන්න ඕන. අම්මා මේකට ගැව්වොත් මෙයා හිතනවා මේක වැරදි. Right. Right. So in early stages, how we are developing our moral development through the self-interest and avoiding punishments. Right. Right. අපි හිතනවා මම මේකට කැමති නම් මං හිතන එක හරි කියලා. දැන් සමහර ළමයි ඔය කරන්නේ. right පොඩි ළමයි. right එයා හිතනවා මෙන්න මේක කරොත් හරි කියලා ඒ නිසා ඒක එයා කරනවා. right. So in the early stage we are developing our moral developments or we are developing our moral judgments because we need to avoid from the punishment and we are having kind of self-interest. So based on these factors only we are deciding this is right and this is wrong. Right. So basically we are deciding this is the good ethics and this is the bad ethics. Right. Right. In the next period, that means next stage, right? The conventional period, right? So how we are deciding this is right and this is wrong? අපි හිතමු පොඩ්ඩක් අපි දැන් ඉස්කෝලේ ගිහිල්ලා 6 7 වසර වගේ ඉන්නේ. right. හරි. අපි හිතමු 6 වසරේ ඉඳන් 11 වසරට යනවා. අපි මොනවද හරි අපි මොනවද වැරදි කියලා හිතන්නේ. කොහොමද අපි ඒක තීරණය කරන්නේ? How we are deciding? Yes. Yes. කොහොමද අපි decide කරන්නේ? ඉස්කෝලේ යන කාලේ අපි හරි කියලා හිතන්නේ මොනවද? කොහොමද ඒක decide කරන්නේ? So basically, in that period, we think a good boy attitude, right? Good boy attitude, because what we have seen in the external factors, we take it as a good thing, and we need to follow it, right? We are supposed to follow it. So we think in a good boy attitude. I need to become a good boy, right? Right. So to become a good boy, I need to follow those factors. The people are extracting the external ethics from the external environment. Right. And also law and order, right? So if you can remember when you are going for a government school, right? The government schools, what they are doing, what teachers are doing, they are teaching. Other than that, කොණ්ඩේ කපාගෙන ඉන්න ඕන හරියට. right? කලිස වඳින්න ඕන මෙහෙම. නැත්නම් ගවුම මෙහෙම තියෙන්නේ. right? කොණ්ඩ බෝල් දෙකක් දාගෙන ඉන්න. right? 7:00 වෙද්දී ස්කෝල්ට එන්න ඕන. 7:00 පස්සේ ආවොත් මෙන්න මෙහෙම. right? ස්කෝලේ අතු ගන්න ඕන. පන්ති අතු ගන්න. right? ඒතර මෙන්න මේ පීරියඩ් එකේ ඉන්න ඕන. right? පීරියඩ් කට් කරන්න බෑ. පීරියඩ් කට් කරලා කැන්ටින් එකට යන්න බෑ. right? පීරියඩ් එක වෙලාවට ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් එකේ හිටත් ගුටි කන්න වෙනවා. right? So law and order. Right? So your moral development will be developed based on the law and order, right? In the conventional period. In the last stage, post-conventional period, when we are become adults, that means think about nowadays. So now you are become adults now. I think most of you more than 18 years old, right? So therefore you are considered to be adult. I don't know, right? So then after we are become adult, right? So how we are become our ethics? How we think this is right and this is wrong? One thing is social contract, right? Right. So with your social contract, with the social circle, right? You think this is right and this is wrong, right? This is right and this is wrong. and also with the principals. So that is the top thing, right? If you have become an adult, so how you need to consider this is right and wrong based on the principles you are having, based on the principle in the society, based on the principles in the framework. If you are a professional, based on the principles in that framework, professional framework, right? So based on that, you need to develop your moral judgments, or you need to behave in an ethical way, right? So this is how, according to Kohlberg, this is how uh, the moral judgment has been developed, has been developed, right? So I will share a video to elaborate more about this theory of Kohlberg's 6 stages of the moral development. Okay, can you all see my screen? Yeah. Can see, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Lawrence Kohlberg's theory claims that our development of moral reasoning happens in 6 stages. The stages themselves are structured in 3 levels: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. To understand this better, imagine a conflict at school. There is a fight in the schoolyard. 2 ninth graders are beating up Tom. Those who watch the fight are at different stages of moral development. Let's see what they do and how they justify their behavior. At stage 1, we make moral judgments based on obedience and punishment. Finn's sense of good or bad is directly linked to whether he gets punished or not. Finn sees what is happening to his friend and wants to help, but he doesn't because he is afraid the teacher may punish him if he gets caught fighting. He asks himself, how can I avoid punishment? At stage 2, we are motivated by self-interest. Mary decides to intervene and help Tom. She knows that she might get punished, but she also knows that she could become a victim herself someday. If she helps Tom now, he might help her in the future. She is asking herself, what's in it for me? At stage 3, interpersonal accord and conformity guide our moral judgment. Betty sees the fight and wants to intervene, but when she realizes that all the others are just watching, she decides not to get involved. She wants others to see that she is a good girl who is conforming with the ethics of the community. She asks herself, what do others think of me? At stage 4, we value authority and want to maintain social order. When the teacher sees the group fighting, he immediately steps in and shouts, "Stop! Fighting at school is forbidden." He feels that, above all, it is important to follow the rules, otherwise chaos breaks out. He feels it is his duty to uphold the rules that sustain a functioning society. He asks himself, how can I maintain law and order? At stage 5, we understand rules as a social contract, as opposed to a strict order. Jessie, who watches from afar, is not sure how she feels about this. To her, rules make sense only if they serve the right purpose. Obviously, the school rules prohibit fighting, but maybe Tom deserves to finally learn his lesson. Just yesterday, he punched a young girl from grade 1. She asks herself, does a rule truly serve all members of the community? At stage 6, we are guided by universal ethical principles. All those involved now have to face the headmaster. He first explains the school rules and why they exist. He then clarifies that rules are valid only if they are grounded in justice. The commitment to justice carries with it an obligation to disobey unjust rules. The headmaster's highest moral principle is compassion. He believes that all people should learn to understand each other's viewpoints and that they don't feel alone with their feelings. He asks, what are the abstract ethical principles that serve my understandings of justice? At the pre-conventional level, Finn is driven by fear and Mary by self-interest. Both judge what is right or wrong by the direct consequences they expect for themselves and not by social norms. This form of reasoning is common among children. At the conventional level, Betty responds to peer pressure, and the teacher follows the rules. Their morality is centered around what society regards as right. At this level, the fairness of rules is seldom questioned. It is common to think like this during adolescence and adulthood. At the post-conventional level, Jessie knows that things are complicated because individuals may disobey rules inconsistent with their own morality. The headmaster follows a universal ethical idea, at complete disconnect with what society thinks or the rules say. To him, everything is solved through compassion. The right behavior, in his opinion, is therefore never a means to an end, but always an end in itself. Not every person reaches this level. The American psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg based his work on Piaget's theory of cognitive development. In order to confirm his theory of stages of moral development, Kohlberg interviewed boys between the ages of 10 and 16. He analyzed how they would justify their decision when confronted with different hypothetical moral dilemmas. We will now present to you the most famous moral dilemma Kohlberg presented to his students. Let's see what you would do. The Heinz Dilemma. A woman was on her deathbed. There was only one drug that the doctors thought might save her. The druggist that made that particular medicine sold it for 10 times the price of the production costs. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, was poor and could not afford to buy the drug, not even with the financial help of his friends. Heinz then asked the pharmacist to sell it to him for half the price, but he refused. To save the life of his wife, Heinz broke into the man's laboratory and stole the medicine. Now tell us, should Heinz have stolen the drug? Would it change anything if Heinz didn't love his wife? What if the person dying was not his wife, but a stranger? Should the police arrest the druggist for murder if the wife had died? Please write your answers and their justifications in the comments below.
Right. So I think now you are having kind of idea, right? So what this concept is elaborating, right? Let me share the screen again. Right. Okay. So now with this information, with this theoretical background, so we are coming to the professional codes, right? Professional codes. So when it comes to the content of the professional codes, right? The professional codes has been developed because of this, because by using the public interest and by looking at the public interest, based on the public interest, they have developed the principle and they have in the framework to address the threats if anything is kind of a threats you are having, what kind of options you are having, what kind of safeguard you are having. So that's how the codes has been developed, right? So codes has been developed. Firstly, when you are before developing a code, what we are looking at is a public interest. What kind of a public interest is there, right? For example, when it comes to Sri Lanka, right? When they are developing a professional codes for the professional accountants, right? Professional accountants, what they are doing, they are looking at what kind of a public interest that the general public is having in regards to the chartered accountants. Chartered accountants again, මහජනතාව බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ මොකද්ද? මහජනතාවගේ ඉන්ට්‍රස්ට් එක තියෙන්නේ මොකද්ද? Public accountants වලට. Right? And sorry, professional accountants. So based on after collecting those information, what kind of a public interest is there, right? So the professional institute has been developed the fundamental principles to follow. So these, as a professional accountant, so these are the fundamental principles you have to follow to achieve the public interest. අපි නිකන් ගත්තොත් එහෙම අපි අනික් ආගම් ඒ වගේත් මේකමයි තියෙන්නේ right මේ කියන concept එක අපි කමු බුද්ධ ආගමෙන් ගත්තොත් එහෙම පන්සිල් පද පහක් තියෙනවා right පද පහක් තියෙනවා පන්සිල් පද පහක් කියලා කියනවා. ඒතර මොනවද ඒ කියන්නේ? ඒ කියන්නේ මොනවද? ඒ කියන්නේ principles. මේවා තමයි fundamental principles ඔයා අනුගමනය කරන්න ඕන. Right. So accordingly, when it comes to professional accountants, if you become a professional accountant, as a professional accountant, you need to follow these fundamental principles because these principles are aligned with the public interest. Right. Right. So that is how the fundamental principle has been established. So once the fundamental principle has been established, right? So once the the fundamental interest has been established, right? What is the next question? Whether we can achieve or not these fundamental principles, right? අපි ගත්තොත් අර කලින් උදාහරණේ පන්සිල් පද පහ ගත්තොත් එම ඒකේ කියනවා බොරු කියන්න එපා. right? බොරු කියන්න එපා. right? ඊට පස්සේ කියනවා මොනවද? right? බොරු කියන්න එපා. right? ඊට පස්සේ මත්පැන් පානය කරන්න එපා. right? right? හොරකම් කරන්න එපා. right? සත්තු මරන්න එපා. right? ඊට පස්සේ වැරදි විදියට වෙන දේවල් වලට යොමු වෙන්න එපා. right? එන්න කියන. right? right? එතකොට ඒ මොකද්ද? ඒ කියන්නේ principles. හැබැයි මේ principles establish කරාට right සමහර වෙලාවට අපිට ප්‍රශ්න එනවා ඒවා හරියට අනුගමනය කරන්න බැරි වෙන තැන්. right? උදාහරණයක් විදිහට අපිට කියනවා බොරු කියන්න එපා කියලා. right? බොරු කියන්න එපා කියලා. සමහර වෙලාවට අපිට සමහර බොරු කියන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා සමහර දේවල් ආරක්ෂා කරනවා. right? 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 සමහර දේවල් ආරක්ෂා කරනවා. right? මම දැක්ක දැන් මේ ළඟදී ලෝකේ ලොකුම බොරුවක් කියනවා අර පාර්ලිමේන්තු එකේ මේකට ගිහිල්ලා අර පොලිසිය කෙනෙක් කියන්නේ මට මතක නැහැ මම දන්නේ මට මතක නැහැ මම කියන්නේ right? right? So likewise, right? එතකොට අපි ඊළඟ principle එක තමයි ඊළඟ stage එක තමයි so after establishing the fundamental principle based on the public interest, next stage is if we can't achieve this fundamental principle, what kind of a safeguards we are having? What kind of a conceptual framework we have to follow if there's any kind of a situation which will arise, we can't go with these fundamental principles, right? So what kind of a situation, if there's a situation whether we can't go with the fundamental principle, what are the safeguards? What are the applicable compliance? What are the conceptual framework we need to follow? Right? So that is the third thing, right? Conceptual framework that address the threats to the compliance and applying the safeguards. Right? If we are having a kind of a threats, right, that will hurt to this fundamental principle, what kind of a conceptual framework we are having to build up the compliance and the safeguard avoiding these threats, right? To avoid these threats, right? So when you are looking at the professional codes, these three areas is there. So අපි කියනවා මේ principle එක හදන්න හේතුව හදපු principle එක achieve කරගන්න බැරි වුණොත් අපි මොකද්ද කරන්න පුළුවන්? Right? So these three concepts are there in the professional codes. So when you are developing the professional codes, these three contents should be there. Right? What are the three contents? Public interest, what the public is thinking about the professional, or if you are going to build up the code for a professional scenario, if we are going to build a kind of a professional course for the professional people, so you need to look at what kind of public interest the people is having in regards to this profession. So based on that, you need to build up the fundamental principle you need to follow to address that public interest. Right. So after having the fundamental principle, if you having a kind of a threats that will hurt to these fundamental principles, what kind of a conceptual framework you need to follow, right? You need to follow to avoid these threats. Or we can say what are the safeguards we are having to avoid or to minimize these threats, right? So these three contents will be there in the every professional code. Every professional code. Is it clear? Is it clear? Yes. Any questions up to now? No? No questions. Guys, any questions? Sadly, today also we are having online one, right? Because of some renovation is going on the SAP campus, right? But in the evening, I have to go to SAP, right? Right. So if you are not talking, there's no point of discussing. Yes. Any questions?
No, sir.
All right. Right. So with that, I'm moving on to the fundamental principles. When it's come to the professionals, which is issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, right? So in the Code of Ethics book, so I have shared the Code of Ethics book, which is the new one. So based on that Code of Ethics book, right, 110, 115 sections, right? So they have discussed about the fundamental principles, right? Fundamental principle for both PA in the business as well as PA in the public practice. So what do you mean by PA in business? PA means professional accountant in business and professional accountant in public practice. What is the difference between these two? Professional accountant in business, professional accounting in public practice. What is difference? What is the difference?
Mercantile
Yes.
sector and audit sector.
Okay. And business?
Like a mercantile sector.
Very good. So let's say a chartered accountant who work as a CEO in a company, right? He will categorize under PA in business. Right. So let's say you are an audit manager in a reputed audit firm, let's say in KPMG, right? Right. So you are categorized under PA in the public practice. Right. So these fundamental principles are applicable for those are working as PAs in business and those who are working as PA in public practice for the both. Right. Right. So there are mainly 5 fundamental principles that have been identified by the CA Sri Lanka. Right. The first one is integrity. So this question is definitely in your examination. I will ask the fundamental principles. I will check the knowledge about the fundamental principles. I'm not directly asked what are the fundamental principles and write the 5 fundamental principles and elaborate the 5 fundamental principles. That is not the question, right? I will give you a case study. The same concept I'm using in the corporate governance is also using in the ethics. Right? But I will ask a question from this slide, right? So fundamental principles, basically we are having 5, right? The first one is integrity, right? So we all know what is the meaning of integrity. You need to become a straightforward and honest in all professional and business relationships, right? Because you are a professional accountant, right? In every business relationship and the professional relationships, you need to straightforward and honest, right? Integrity implies the fair dealing and truthfulness. Professional accountants shall not normally be associated with reports, communication, returns, content false or misleading information. Right. අමෙලෙම professional accountant කෙනෙක් වුණාම ඔයා අවංක වෙන්න ඕනේ ඔයාගේ professional and business relationships වල. සහ ඔයා කෙලින් ඉන්න ඕනේ. right? You need to maintain the integrity. So when you are dealing with something, you need to fairly dealing with something. Right? Business transaction එක deal කරනවා නම් ඒක ඔයා fair විදිහට deal කරන්න. හැම වෙලේම සත්‍යවාදී වෙන්න ඕනේ. Truthfulness එක maintain කරන්න. Right? So that is the integrity. Right? Then the objectivity. Not to compromise the professional or business judgment because of bias, conflict of interest, or undue influence of others. Right? Right. So you are having a professional business judgment to make. Right? For example, if you are a professional accountant in a public practice, you are working as a audit manager in a petroleum company, right, in Sri Lanka. Right. So you have identified a fraud. You have identified a fraud. Right. So what you have to do, you need to report it. But let's say the manager of that company will ask you to not to do it. If you are not doing it, I will give you 10 million rupees. Right, 10 million rupees. Right. So then you are not going to reveal it. So that means you are breaching the fundamental principles of objectivity, because you are compromising your professional and business judgment because of some kind of an influence, right? Some kind of an influence. So therefore, you as a fundamental principle, you need to maintain the objectivity. That means not to compromise professional or business judgment because of any bias, conflict of interest, or undue influences of others. Right. So that is the second fundamental principle you need to have. Then the third one, professional competence and the due care. Right. Right. As you are become a chartered accountant, you think like I am the king of this world. Right. Right. Most of the fresh chartered accountant feel like අම්මට සිරි මම දැන් chartered accountant කෙනෙක් දැන් එකෙක්ටව බය වෙන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. මම තමයි accounts ගැන ඔක්කොම දන්නේ. Right. I know everything about accounting. I'm the king of accounting. සියල්ල දත්. Right. දැන් අපි කියන කෙල පැමිණිලා ඉන්නේ කියන. Right. 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 So even though you have become a chartered accountant, right, sometimes you don't have some competencies to do some kind of work. For example, when it comes to the IFRS 17, IFRS 9, right, sometimes even you become a chartered accountant, you don't have the proper knowledge. Right. Right. So as you are a chartered accountant, people are asking to perform some work. For example, sometimes the bank will ask you to perform a ECL calculation. Right. Right. ECL calculation, expected credit loss calculation under the IFRS 9. Right. Since you are a chartered accountant, they think that you can do it. But actually, you have not followed the IFRS 9 correctly. You become a chartered accountant without doing the IFRS 9. A ප්‍රශ්න ලියන්න නැතුව තමයි chartered accountant කෙනෙක් උනේ. Right. ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේ අදලා IFRS 9 නේද? ඊටු ඔක්කොම ආඩ පුළුවන්. Right. So then දැන් ඔයා හිතනවා මම chartered accountant කෙනෙක් හින්දා මම මේක බාරගත්ත නැත්නම් අවුල් වැඩි. Right. මට හොඳ නැහැ. ඒ නිසා මම මේක බාරගන්නවා. Right. So that means you are breaching a fundamental principle of professionalism. Right. Fundamental professionalism. Because if you are accepting that kind of a job or that kind of a work, right, you need to make sure that you are having that competency level to perform that job. So otherwise, it's better to not to take it. Right. අපි ගත්තොත් මේක හොඳටම accountants ලා අපි හිතනවානේ accounting කියන්නේ financial accounting එතකොට ඒක වැරද්දක් වුණාම ලොකු කේස් එකක් නැහැ කියලා. හැබැයි ඒක තමයි ලොකුම කේස් එක. Financial frauds කියන්නේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් crime එකක් අපරාධමය වරදක් කියලා තමයි කියන්නේ. Right. හැබැයි අපිට නිකන් තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ මේකෙන් මොකුත් අර life එකට හානියක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ නේද? මිනිස්සෙක් මැරෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපි මේක apply කරොත් එම් doctor කෙනෙක්ට. Right. මේ professional ethics අපි apply කරනවා doctor කෙනෙක්ට. මම ඩොක්ටර් කෙනෙක්. right. ඒකට දැන් හිතනවා ඩොක්ටර් කෙනෙක් කියලා. ඔයා ඉන්නවා ටිකක් ඈත පළාතකට ගිහිල්ලා ඉන්න ඩොක්ටර් කෙනෙක් විදියට. හරිද? ඒ පළාතේ ඉන්න එකම ඩොක්ටර් ඔයා. right. ඔයාට එනවා දැන් ඔයා සාමාන්‍යයෙන් මේ පළාතේ හිතමු අම්මා කෙනෙක් වෙනවා බබෙක් හම්බෙන්නේ. right. ඒතර මම සාමාන්‍ය ડોක්ටර් කෙනෙක්. right. ඒතර මට පුළුවන් දෙයක් කරන්න. Even though I'm a doctor, so I can't do it because I don't have that specialist knowledge. Right. Right. If you want to do that, you need to have that skill and the knowledge how to do it. Even though you are having the professional background, if you don't have the knowledge and skills, so it's better to not to take that job. Right. So in the fundamental principle, it says to maintain the professional knowledge and the skill at the level required, very important, to ensure that the client or employer receive a competent professional service based on the current development in practice, legalization, and the techniques. Very important. Sometimes you have become a chartered accountant 20 years back. Right? You are having the chartered accountant title. That's correct. Right? But you don't know about anything about the IFRS 17, which is a new standard. And you don't know anything about the IFRS 18, the new standard. Right? Since you are a senior guy, so you think like, if I'm rejecting this, I have something like, they think like I don't know. Right? So that's why it says competent professional service. You need to give the competent professional service based on the current development in practice, legalization, and the techniques. A professional accountant should act diligently and in accordance with applicable technical and professional standards when providing a professional service. Right. So you need to have a professional competence as well as you need to have a due care. That means if you are performing a job, you need to do it in very careful manner, carefully, right? By applying all the principles, all the requirements, all the standards which is required to do the job. So that we call it as due care. Right? So therefore, as a third fundamental principle, you need to have the professional competence and the due care. Right? Professional competence and the due care. Right? And the fourth one is the confidentiality. Right? Confidentiality. Give me a second. Right. Sorry. Then the fourth principle is confidentiality. Right. Fourth fundamental principle is confidentiality. So what do you mean by confidentiality? Right. ඔයගොල්ලෝ ගත්තොත් එහෙනම් ඔයගොල්ලෝ ඔඩිට් ෆර්ම් එක වැඩ කරද්දී right ඔඩිට් ෆර්ම් එකේ වැඩ කරන ගමන් කම්පැනි එක ඔඩිට් කරන ගමන් කම්පැනි එකේ මොනවා හරි තිබ්බයක් ගෙදර ඇවිල්ලා කියනවා. හරි. right යාළුවට කියනවා මෙන්න මෙහෙම අපේ කම්පැනි එක මෙන්න මෙහෙම වැරද්දක් වෙලා තියෙනවා කියලා කියනවා. right so that is also a breaching of fundamental principles. Right. So if you are having a professional and the business relationship, right, the confidential information you need to protect. Right. To respect the confidentiality of the information acquired as a result of professional and the business relationship. And therefore not to disclose any such information to the third parties without proper and specific authority. Unless there is a legal or professional right or duty to disclose, nor to use the information for the personal advantage of the professional accountant or the third party. Right. So these things actually happening in most of the companies. Right. For example, if you are working as a director in a company, right, if the director board is taking a decision, right, to declare the dividends, the director can exchange that information to any other person. We are going to declare the dividends, so the share price can be goes high, so you can better to keep the shares with you. Right. 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 So that is breaching the fundamental principles of professional ethics. Right. You need to respect the confidentiality of the information which you have gathered by using a professional business relationship. Right. But sometimes you have to disclose the confidential information. So for example, if there is a kind of a law case, right, if the legal enforcement is there to disclose the confidential information, then you can disclose. නැත්නම් සමහර කට්ටිය කියන්න පුළුවන් අපේ professional ethics අනුව අපිට confidential information කියන්න බෑ. ඒ නිසා අපි මොකුත් කියන්නේ. But when it comes to legal enforcement, legal concept, so if even the confidential information is there, if it is a requirement in the legal context, so you have to reveal it. Right? You have to reveal it. Right? So that is the fourth fundamental principle. And the last one, the professional behavior. Right? You need to behave like a professional. Right? Even you become a chartered accountant, so you need to become, now you become a professional. Right? So you have to become you need to maintain your behavior in a professional way. How you are going to dress, right? When you are dressed, when you are when you are talking with the people, right? Right? When you are behaving with the people, so you need to always maintain that professionalism. Right? Right? That we call it as professional behavior. Even though all the fundamental principles are there, you are not behaving in a professional way. It's if it is discredit to the profession, මේ මොකෙද්ද මේ chartered accountant කෙනෙක් මෙහෙම ඉන්නවද කියලා අහුවොත් අවුල්. ඒක profession එකට හොඳ නැහැ. Right? උදාහරණයක් විදිහට so as an example, when you are doing audit in a audit firm, right? Let's say you are doing audit in an audit firm, right? Right. So after audit, so normally what we are having is we are having a kind of a party, right? All the company CEO and the CFO are also participating, and the audit team also participating because we are ending up a good relationship, right? So in that party, what happened? Audit manager, හොඳටම බීලා වැටිලා, right? හොඳටම බීලා වැටිලා. So what will happen? It will create some discredit to the profession, right? So therefore, to comply with relevant laws and regulations and avoid any actions that discredit to the profession, right? Discredit to the profession, right? Discredit to the profession, right? So one of the central bank governor, I'm not going to say the name, one of the central bank governor who is a chartered accountant, who is involved with some kind of frauds, right? And people are shouting out, right? Why this person is keeping this one, right? Right. But when it comes to professional bodies, right? What they are doing is they are not revealing the things because they are professionals, right? So they are issuing the fundamental principles and they need to maintain the confidentiality. but they are act against that actually, right? Because it will create some discredit to the profession. So therefore, that for that governor, some actions has been taken, right? Because he's not comply with the relevant rules and regulations, and that will create some discredit to the profession, right? Discredit to the profession, right? So these are the 5 fundamental principles that has been there in the professional code of Sri Lanka. So these 5 fundamental principles has been developed, right? Based on what? Public interest. Based on the public interest the general public is having regarding the professional accountants. Right? If you have become a professional accountant, අනිවාර්යෙන් මේ පහ ඔයා follow කරන්න ඕන. Right? Integrity වෙන්න ඕන, ඔයා straight forward හරි මෙච්චර කාලයකට එහෙම වෙලා නැත්නම් ඔයා එහෙම වෙන්න ඕන. Right? Give me a second. Right. So then based on the fundamental principles, right? Right. So these are the exemption for the confidentiality, right? So if there is as a fundamental principle, you need to have maintain the confidentiality. But some situations, right? So there are some exemption for the confidentiality. Disclose is permitted by the law, is authorized by a client or the employer, right? So you can disclose if the information, if that is permitted by law and that has been authorized by the client or the employer. Disclose is required by a law. For example, production of the documents or provision of evidence to a legal proceedings, right? Disclosure to the appropriate public authorities, right? In those kind of situations, so you have to disclose even the confidential information to the legal proceedings or the courts. There's a professional duty or right to disclose when not prohibited by the law. Right? If there is a professional duty that you have to disclose such thing, which is not prohibited by law, so you can breach the confidentiality. To comply with the quality review of a member body of another professional body, the respond to inquiry and investigation by the member body, to protect the professional interest, to comply with the technical standards and the ethical requirement, right? So in that scenario, you can breach the confidentiality. Actually, these are the exemptions, not breaching, exemption for the confidentiality, right? Right. So then based on these fundamental principles, so we are having a different threats. That means if you are, even though we are having a principles, sometimes we can have a threats. මේක මෙහෙම කරන්න එපා. මෙහෙම කරොත් මං ඔයාලට මේක දෙන්නේ නැහැ. Right? Right? So we are having a different threats. Right? So basically we are having 5 different threats which will arise because of this fundamental principle. Threats to the fundamental principles. Right? Firstly, I'm looking at in the context of the professional accountant in business, right? So as we discuss the fundamental principles for both the professional accountant in business and the professional accountant in the public practice. Firstly, I'm discussing the threats which is related to the professional accountant in business. That means, for example, chartered accountant who's become a CEO in a company is a professional accountant in business, right? So what are the threats we are having? So basically 5 threats we can identify. First one is the self-interest threat. So what do you mean by the self-interest threat? Self-interest threat. What do you mean by that? Self-interest. In a definition, it says financially or other interest of the professional accountant or an immediate family member inappropriately influence the judgment or the behavior. Right? Right. For example, the financial interest, loans and guarantees, incentive compensation arrangement, personal use of corporate assets, external commercial pressure, acceptance of the gifts. Right. Sometimes when you are doing audit, right? So sometimes not audit, sometimes you are working as a CEO in a company, right? Right, CEO in a company. So what you for manipulate the accounts, the directors are giving you the gifts. Director saying, please manipulate this fund, then we can have a bonus, right? So I will give you another bonus because you are manipulating the accounts. So that is creating some self-interest, financial interest, right? So that is kind of a threat, right? Self-interest, right? Then self-review threat, right? Self-review threat. Evaluation of judgment by accountant who made the judgment or a member of the same organization. Business decision being subject to review and justification by the same accountant responsible for making those decisions or preparing the data supporting them. Right? Self-review threat. Right? For example, in a company, right, the accountant will make the payment vouchers and he approved the payment. He take the invoices. All the scenarios has been done by this accountant. So he is reviewing his own work. Right? The business decision has been taken by the same person who is preparing that document. The CEO is preparing the new product development. And as a chairman of the board, he is approving that. Right? Self-review thread. Right? Self-review thread. Then advocacy. Accountants promoting a position or opinion to point where objective may be compromised. What do you mean by that? Featuring the employee's cause aggressively without regards to reasonableness of the statement made. Furthering legitimate goals of employee organization would not be generally create an adequacy threat. Right? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Adequacy. ඔයා කියනවා employee මේක කරන්න කරේ නැත්නම් ඔයා වයින් කරනවා. Right? ඔයා වයින් කරනවා. Right? Adequacy. Right? Accounting promoting a position or opinion to point where objective may be compromised. Because I'm an accountant, so you have to follow what I'm saying because I know everything. Right? Right. So that is a good adequacy. Then the familiarity, a close relationship resulting excessive trust in or sympathy for others. Right? Right. So chairman of the board is there and the CEO is the wife of the chairman. Long association of the business context sometimes. Right? Sometimes you are having a long association with the supplier. Right? And supplier will say, hi CEO, right? I will increase the price. Even the price is not increased, but I will increase the price. From that incremental amount, I will give you 50%. So with the long association, right, you are having a kind of familiar with that. Right? Right. Intimidation. Accountant not acting objectively because of actual or perceived pressures. Right? Make current. Threat of dismissal from the employment. This is mostly happening in the government organizations. Right? Ministry is saying, if you are not doing this, I will dismiss you. I will transfer you to the quantum transfer. Lanka. Right? Influence of dominating personality. Right? Dominating personality. Right? The president says, right? President says, if you are not doing this, I will transfer you. Right? If you are not doing this, I will do this to you. Right? So likewise, threat karno, right? Intimidation. Accounting not acting objectively because of actual or perceived pressure he is receiving from a third party or from a kind of a statement or from kind of a way, any other way. Right? He's receiving a pressure. Right? So those are the threats which will impact to the fundamental principles when it comes to the professional accountant in business. When it comes to the professional accountant in business. Right? So then professional accountant in practice, that means basically the audit manager or the audit partner or even you are working as audit executive or audit trainee, supervisor, right? You are categorized under the professional accountant in practice. Right? So same 5 threats in a different perspective, right? Self-interest threat is, we call it as financial or other interest of a professional accountant or an immediate family member, inappropriately influence the judgment of the behavior. So what we are having a financial interest in the client, right? So when you are going for a, let's say, big 3 audit firms as a trainee, right? In their documents, when you are going there as a fresher, right? Fresh trainee, right? So what they are doing is, what they are giving you some documents. So in that document, there's a document called financial interest of the clients. So they have mentioned about the clients they are having in their audit firm, right? And they are asking few questions from you, whether you are having shares, whether you are having any kind of a family member working in that organization, right? Whether you are having a kind of a close association with that organization, you are a supplier of that organization. Likewise, there are some questions has been asked because they need to check whether you are having any kind of financial interest about the client. For example, you are having some shares in Haley's, right? You are working in a KPMG, but you are having some shares in Haley's, right? Now the KPMG audit team is going to do the audit in Haley's. right? You are a member of that audit team. So what will become? You are having kind of financial interest, right? You are having a self-interest about the company. So you are having shares. You think if the Haley's company profitability goes high, then I can get more benefit from my shares. So then you are not going to identify any deficiencies in the financial statements. Right? Even their, let's say, their expenses need to go high, but you are not highlighting that, because if it is goes high, the profitability goes down, then it will hurt to you. Right? So therefore, you are not going to say it, or you are not going to reveal it. Right? Right? As an audit manager, if you are having a financial interest on the client, that will create some self-interest threat. Then self-review threat. Right? So most of the small audit firms are doing this, right? Even though this threat is there, right? What they are doing, they are preparing the financial accounting and or financial statements, not accounting, financial statement, and also they are doing the audit of that financial statements. Financial accounts are done in mama, audit කරන්නේ මම. Right? So when it comes to the big audit firms, they are providing the what you call the advisory services. Right? They are providing the advisory services. Right? So that is also creating some self-review threat. Right? Because they are giving the judgment, they are giving the evaluations. For example, insurance companies, they are IFRS 17 things are done by the audit firms. But that same company will audit by that same audit firm sometimes. So there will be some self-review threats can be created. Right? Right? Adequacy. Adequating the client's cause in a lawsuit. Right? Right? And the familiarity. Audit team member having a family at the client. Right? So you are a trainee of the KPMG, your father is working as a CEO in that company. Right? Father is working as CEO in the company. Family trait. Then intimidation threats of replacement due to disagreement. This is mostly there in the professional services, professional practice. Right? Audit teams, audit partners are afraid that the client, if you are providing a, let's say, if you are providing a qualified opinion, so they believe that next year the client will remove us. For example, let's assume that an audit firm who is doing a commercial bank PLC. Commercial bank PLC. Commercial bank is one of the largest banks in Sri Lanka. Right? And also they are having some branches in the other countries as well. Right? So the audit fee of that audit is, I think, more than 30 million or something. Right? So partners are looking at this money. Right? If they are providing a qualified opinion in the next year, definitely the commercial bank remove that partner and hire a new partner. Right? So therefore, it will create some intimidation threat. ඕගොල්ලෝ අපිට qualified opinion එකක් දුන්නොත් අපි ඊළඟ අවුරුද්දේ ඕගොල්ලෝ ගන්න නැහැ. ඕගොල්ලෝ අපිට වැඩියෙන් වද දුන්නොත් එමේ මේවා audit evidence ඕනේ කි අපි ඊළඟ අවුරුද්දේ ඕගොල්ලෝ ගන්නත් අපි වෙන කෙනෙක් ගන්නවා. අපිට වෙන කෙනෙක් එක්ක වැඩ කරන එක ලේසි. Right? So it will create the intimidation threat. Threat of replacement due to disagreements. Right? Disagreement. So those are the threats to the fundamental principle when it comes to professional accountant in practice. Right? Professional accountant in practice. Right? Any questions? Any issues? Any concerns? Any inquiries? Yes. So I have, I think I have talking continuously for 1 hour now. Right? So any questions? Any criticisms? Any suggestions? Any additional things to add? Yeah. Because I can't see you. Right? If I can see you, then I can understand whether you got my points or not. What I can see is only the screen, white screen. Right? So you better to talk. Any questions? No questions. Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
No
sir.
question.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. ඉරිදරෑට තමයි ප්‍රශ්න එන්නේ. හරි. හරි. මේ කැලෙන් එන්නේ නැහැ. corporate governance වලින් ඔයගොල්ලන්ට ප්‍රශ්න එනවා. ඉරිදට. right?
සර් පොඩි කන්සර්න් එකක් තියෙනවා.
Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Sir, that I saw that we cannot go for previous questions, so we cannot
Yes.
skip any question at any time. So I think can you eliminate that condition so we can if we forget some part we can later mark the answer.
The concern is when I'm giving that facility, right? You guys can copy, right? So that's the one strategy I'm following to stop that, right? I can give without that option when we are having a physical examination, right? So
Okay.
otherwise, if I'm allowing to you to do the quiz at home, අඩුගානේ ඒකවත් තියෙන්න ඕනේ නේ as a control mechanism, right? So what you can do is you can spend the required minutes in that question and think and do it and go there. And you can't come back. If I'm allowing to come back, then no point of having a quiz, right? Because you are having a technology, right? You are having a technology, right? You can have ChatGPT, Gemini, and all the everything, no, right? So you can do it, right? So if I'm giving that chance also, then no point of having quiz. It's better to award 20 marks for everyone. And so that's why that
And
option
also
is
we
there.
are going to have 30 questions, right, sir?
Yes, 30 questions for 20 questions for 30 minutes, right? 5, correct. 20 questions
That's
for
what-
30 minutes.
Yeah, that's what you said before, sir. But in LMS, it says 30 questions for 40 minutes.
Okay, I will correct it. 20 questions for 30 minutes.
Okay, sir.
Okay, 20 questions for 30 minutes. I'll correct it.
Okay, sir.
Right. And also 20 marks
And,
will be allocated. Okay.
Okay, sir. Sir, did you upload the answers for that MCQ questionnaire?
I'll upload. I'll upload those things. Right.
Okay,
I'll
sir.
upload. අද රැට අනිවාර්යෙන් දාන්න. right. ඒක හෙට දවසම තියෙනවනේ බලන්න. එච්චරලා කියන්නේ නැහැ නෝ බලන්න. right. අද රැට දාන්න.
Attendance mark කරද්දි sir පොඩි issue එකක් ආවා. ලැග්ුණා ගොඩක් වෙලා මේ කට්ටියගේ mark උනේ නැහැ කියලා කිව්වා. මගෙත් අතරම අන්තිම වෙලාවේ තමයි attendance mark උනේ. QR එකක් ආපහු share කරන්න පුළුවන්ද sir?
හරි හරි කිව්වා ෂෙයා කරමු. right. Other than that, any questions relating to this area? You are having questions regarding the quiz and the attendance. Other than that, I will share the keyword. Don't worry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. No questions.
No sir.
All right. All right. So then we are moving to the third context, right? So we are having fundamental principles and we are having the threats. So now, if we are having a threats or ethical issues, right? What is the conceptual framework we need to follow to address these ethical issues, right? Right. The circumstances in which the professional accountants operate may create specific threats to compliance with the fundamental principles. It is impossible to define the every situation, right? දැන් සමහර ඒවා එක එක්කෙනාට වෙනස්, right? Depending on the situation වෙනස් වෙනවා මේ fundamental principles වලට adhere වෙන්න බැරි වෙන අවස්ථා. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට මිනිස්ටර් කියනවා ඔයා මේක කරේ නැත්නම් ඔයා එළියට දානවා. තව දැනක කියනවා තව එක්කෙනෙක් ඔළුවට තුවක්කුවක් දීලා කියනවා ඔයා මේක කරන්න ඕන. එතකොට මෙන්න මේ කියන එක එක situations වලදී address කරන්න ඕන විදිය වෙනස්. ඒ නිසා තමයි general acceptable conceptual framework එකක් දීලා තියෙන්නේ. මෙන්න වගේ ethical issue එකක් આવොත් මෙන්න මේ framework එක follow කරන්න. It is impossible to define the every situation that creates threats to the compliance with the fundamental principle and specific the appropriate actions. In addition, the nature of the engagement and the work assignment may differ, and consequently, different threats may be created, require the application of different safeguards, right? Right. So you need to apply the different safeguards based on the situation, right? So when it's come to the application of the safeguards, so this conceptual framework better to follow, right? So first of all, what you have to do is, if there is any kind of a threat, you need to identify what is the threat, right? What kind of a threat you are having. Minister ඇවිල්ලා මට කියනවා මේක කරන්න කියලා. That is the threat. Intimidation threat. Right? Minister ඇවිල්ලා කියනවා මට මේක කරන්න. Right? So what we can do? You can evaluate the threat, identify what is the level of the threat. Is a low level, depending on the situation, right? Low, medium, or high. You need to evaluate the threat. What kind of threat you are having, evaluate it. Then address the threat, right? You need to provide the solutions, or you need to follow the safeguards, right? So this is the conceptual framework you need to follow. First of all, what you have to do, identify the threat and evaluate the threat, what kind of threat you are having, whether it's a high level of threat or low level or medium level. Then you need to address the threat, right? You need to use the safeguard, or you need to use some kind of options, right? 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 So this is how you need to apply the conceptual framework, right? Conceptual framework, right? Right. So identifying the threat is doing by what? You need to look at the fundamental principles, and you need to look at what is the threat you are having, which will affect to these fundamental principles. And basically, we are having 5 fundamental principles and 5 threats. So you need to identify what threat you are having, what fundamental principle you are breaching. Then you need to address the threat. You need to evaluate it, and you need to address the threat. So how we are going to address the threat? The enhanced conceptual framework emphasizes that threats are addressed either by illuminating the circumstances creating the threat. පළවෙනි option එක තමයි වාට threat එකකින් අයින් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. threat එකක් address කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඔයා ඒ threat එක හම්බෙන එකකින් අයින් වෙලා ඉන්නවා. ඒක කරන්නේ නැහැ. right? ඒක කරන්න. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට වාට මිනිස්ටර් කියනවා. right? මෙන්න මේක බොරුවට හදන්න. right? මෙන්න මේ numbers වෙන බොරුවට වෙනස් කරන්න. ඒතර මිනිස්ටර් කියනවා මම මේක කරන්නේ නැහැ. මම මේ job එකෙන් අයින් වෙනවා. I'm not going to perform this. Illuminating circumstances creating the threat. You can illuminate the circumstances. The second option, applying the safeguard whether they are available or capable of reducing the identified threats to an acceptable level. Right? You can apply the safeguard is there. The safeguard is there. No? So you can apply those safeguards, and you need to identify whether the safeguards available having a kind of a capability to reduce or eliminate a threat for an acceptable level. Right? And declining or ending the specific professional activity. Right? You are not going to do anything. You are ending up your professional activity. Right? For example, if the audit team is asked to manipulate the things, you are declining your professional activity. Right? The conceptual framework approach assists the professional accountant in comply with the ethical requirement of the code and meeting their responsibility to act in the public interest. Right? Because we know professional codes has been developed based on the public interest. It accommodates many variations in circumstances that creates threats to the compliance with the fundamental principles and can deter a professional accountant from concluding that the situation is permitted if it is not specifically prohibited. Right? Specifically prohibited. Right? So you can understand how you are going to address the threat. Whether you can illuminate the circumstances that creating the threat, you can apply the safeguard, or you can declare or ending the professional activity you are involved in. Right? You are involved. Right. So then the safeguards. Right? Then we need to discuss about the safeguards. Right? Right. So before discussing the safeguards, so let's have a 10 minutes break, right? So now time is 10:10, right? So we will start the discussion again at 10:20, okay? Right. So before that, any questions? No? I know you don't have any questions, okay? So let's have a 10 minutes of break. So then have your breakfast and come. Okay. Right. Shall we start? Right. So after identifying the issues, right, or the threats, right? Firstly, we need to identify the threats. Then we need to evaluate the threat, and we need to address the threat, right? So when it's come to the addressing the threat, right, in the second point, we can have the safeguards. So what kind of safeguards we are having, right? So basically, we can have two kind of safeguards. One is safeguards created by the profession, right? Safeguard created by the profession, legalization or regulations, right? Safeguard is there in the, let's say, kind of a document, right? Safeguards තියෙනවා මේ profession එකට මේ අදාළ safeguards තියෙනවා. Legal විදියට මේ safeguards එක තියෙනවා. ඔයාලට කවුරු හරි තර්ජනය කරොත් ඔයාලට පුළුවන් නඩුවක් දාන්න. Right? Regulations වල තියෙනවා. According to financial regulations, even the ministry is saying to do this, you need to get the proper approval, right? According to regulations. So those are the safeguards you are having. The legal concept, professional or regulations, documented safeguards, right? Documented safeguards. And also, we can have a safeguard in the workplace for the accountant in the business, right? So different safeguards. For example, we are having an internal control protocol. Even the CEO saying you have to do this based on this internal control protocol, you can't go against that, right? So likewise, when it comes to safeguard, we can divide the safeguard into two categories. One is safeguard created by the profession or legalization of the regulations. The second one, the safeguard in the workplace for the accountant in the business, right? So then example for the ethical safeguard created by the profession, legislation or the regulations. So these are the safeguards. Educational training and experience requirement for entry into the profession, right? So if you want to become a CEO, right, definitely you need sometimes in the business, right? So they will do the background check, right? Right? They will do the background check and they will look at the education background and they will look at the experience. If you want to become a CEO, you need to have 20 years of experience, right? So likewise, these are the safeguard when you are entering into the profession. They are checking the education training, experience requirement for entering into the profession. Continuing professional development requirements, right? Right. And corporate governance regulations. We have discussed the corporate governance regulations. You need to have a audit committee. You need to have a remuneration committee. You need to have non-executive directors. You need to follow the rule-based approach, principle-based approach, likewise. Right. Corporate governance regulations are there. And professional standards are there. Right. Professional standards are there. Professional regulatory monitoring and disciplinary procedures are there. Right. Professional standards like ethical code of ethics issued by CA Sri Lanka. Right. Different professions has different ethics, right? When it's come to the what do you call the defense, right? The defense authorities, so they can't do the defense ගත්තොත් මේගොල්ලන්ට උද්ඝෝෂණ කරන්න බෑ, right? That's a kind of ethics, professional ethics or standards they are having. Professional or regulatory monitoring and discipline procedures, right? You know, if you are breaching some professional procedures, what kind of a disciplinary things we can have? It's a regulated thing, right? So those are the ethical safeguard you can have in the business, right? And the ethical safeguard in the workplace. Employers oversight system, basically the internal control, employee ethics and conduct programs. You can have the training program, recruitment procedures. When you are having a recruitment procedures, we can have a different processes to follow. Strong internal controls, appropriate disciplinary process, leadership that stress the ethics. Leadership pe kiyana හැම වෙලේම ethically you got to behave වෙන්න ඕන. You need to behave in ethical way, right? Leadership that stress the ethics. The Lanka leadership pe stress කරන්නේ ethics breach කරන්නමයි stress කරන්නේ, right? So leadership that stress the ethics, right? Policies and procedures that promote and monitoring employee performance. Timely communication of the employees, policies, procedures to all employees, training and education of the employees, right? Right? Because under the fundamental principles, when you are doing the professional things, you need to have a professional competence, right? So how we are achieving that professional competence? Through the training and education of the employees. And the whistleblowing provisions, needs to be there. We have discussed about this whistleblowing thing. Consultation with another professional accountant. You can ask from another professional accountant what we need to do in a such kind of situation, right? You can consult a professional accountant. So in other words, a strong control environment. However, if these safeguards are ineffective, the professional accountant may have to seek legal advice or resign, right? Even this safeguard is there, right? Right? Even if this safeguard is there, if your control environment is not strong and your safeguard is ineffective, right? Ineffective, the accountant has to go to the legal advice or in a ultimately, if it is not work, you have to resign, right? As a safeguard when there is a fraud trade. Then අපිට කොච්චර මේ කියන safeguards තිබ්බත් ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ control environment එක weak නම් සහ මේ safeguard effective නැත්නම් safeguards තිබ්බට වැඩක් නැහැ. Strong internal controls තියනවා කියලා කිව්වට internal controls හරියට නැහැ. Right. Right. ඒවා effective නැත්නම් අවසානයේදී accountant කරන්න පුළුවන් එකම දේ තමයි safeguard එක තමයි. එයාට පුළුවන් legal advice ගන්න. මම මොකද්ද මේකට කරන්න ඕන legally. So otherwise if it is not workable, so what you can ultimately do is you can resign from that job or resign from that engagement. You can eliminate that engagement, right? You can decline that engagement, right? So those are the safeguards we are having when there is a threat, right? When there is a threat which is impacted to the fundamental principles of the accountant, right? So we are not discussing about general public or the personal ethics. We are discussing about the professional ethics here that you have to remember, right? That you have to remember, right? Is it clear? Yeah. Any questions? Any practical questions you are having? Guys. Any questions? All good. Right. So if it is good, so now I'm moving on to the classroom discussion, right? Thank you. What can I do? All right. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the classroom discussion, right? Practice question number 1, right? So I have some other questions as well, right? When it's come to this classroom discussions, right? So question number 1, draft financial statement for the World Tea PLC for the year ended 31st March 2002 have been prepared, and the statement of profit or loss shows a sharp drop in operating profit compared to the previous year. This has a knock-on effects on operating cash flow in the statement of cash flows. The director of the World Tea PLC are of the opinion that this is the result of major customers of suffering financial difficulties together with a general reduction in the level of trade in the second half of the 2001. They are, however, sure that this was a temporary problem and believe that the trading has improved significantly in the final 2 months of the reporting period. Right. The directors are concerning that the falls in operating cash flow may result in the breach of loan covenant and a drop in market confidence. They are also aware that the drop in operating profit will adversely affect the performance-related pay awarded to directors and senior management of the World Tea. They therefore believe that it is the best interest of the company and its long-term health to make some adjustments to the draft financial statements. They have suggested to the financial controller, a chartered accountant, that she include the proportions of the operating expenses as extraordinary items in the statement of profit or loss stated after the operating profit, including a proportion of the proceeding generated from the sales of property, plant and equipment as a cash generated from the operations in the statement of the cash flow. All properties, plant and equipment is used in the World Tea operations. Explain the ethical responsibilities of the financial controller in the respects of the director's suggestions, right? So that is the question, right? So read the question and try to write an answer, write an answer, and I will take volunteers to answer this question. So this is basically a kind of a question which you are having examination, the same type of question when you are looking at the last year's paper also, I have put the ethical consideration question like this. right? So these are kind of a question you need to address, right? So read this question and write an answer. I will give you 10 minutes. Right. Anyone answers this question? Yes. So what kind of ethical responsibility that financial control is having? Whether she wants to go with this proposal or not. That's that's the first question. No? So directors has been suggest two things to do. So whether as a chartered accountant, as a financial controller, so what is your ethical consideration? Yes. Guys. So when it comes to this financial controller, right? This financial controller, right? She needs to look at two things. One is accounting principles. That means SLFRS and LKSs. And code of ethics. Code of ethics. That means the principles which has been issued by the Srilanka. Right? So those are the two things she knows to know. He needs to aware about the accounting standards as well as the code of ethics. Right? So then only, so based on that, the financial controller needs to decide what she needs to do. Right? So her responsibility is to secure these accounting standards and code of ethics. So therefore, she needs to aware about this thing at the first instance, right? And here, what is the issue? What you have to do? Firstly, you need to identify the issue, right? According to our this one, right? Conceptual framework, right? What you need to do? You need to identify the issue, right? Identify the issue, right? Identify the threat, right? The first one is they have suggested to do two things. But one is including a proportion of operating expenses as extraordinary item in the statement of profit or loss stated after operating profit. And the second one, including a proportion of the proceeds generated from the sales of property, plant and equipment as a cash generated from the operations. Right. So according to the LKS 1, right? According to the LKS 1, we can't include any item, right? Any item which is related to the income or expenses as extraordinary items according to the LKS 1. So therefore, to make the adjustment requested by the director would result in an unfair presentation of the profit. Right? Right. If you are adhere to what the director is suggesting, it will create some unfair presentation of the profit. Unfair presentation of the profit based on the LKS 1. Right? That is one issue. And second suggestion by the director is to report the cash generated through sales of property under the operational activity. Right? Under the operational activity. Right? So according to the LKS 7, right? According to the LKS 7, right? They are saying that cash flow associated with the sales of item owned by used plant, right, are categorized as what? Investing activity. It should be
activity.
Yeah, investing activity. It should be categorized as investing activity. Right. So therefore, this also breaching the LKS 7. Right. Right. So these are the two cases here. These are the two issues here because we are misleading the SLFRSs. Right. Director is asked to mislead the SLFRSs. Right. That is the first thing. So then we need to look at the code of ethics. Right. What are the ethical threats you are having to the fundamental principles? Right. What are the ethical threats we are having here? What are the ethical threats we are having here? What kind of threats we are having?
Issues
When
for
you're reading,
issues for integrity and objectivity.
okay, what is the threat? So those are the
Uh,
fundamental principles is breaching. So how these fundamental principles has been breached? What is the threat here we are having? When you are reading this case study, you can identify. Because directors are saying,
Intimidation?
yes, correct. Intimidation. Because it says directors are saying they are also aware that the drop in operating profit will adversely affect the performance related pay awarded to the director and the senior management of the team. They therefore believe that the best interest of the company and its long-term health to make some adjustment to the draft profit. So financial control is in the senior management, right? So therefore, if you are not adjusting this, what will happen? It will impact to the future payments or the bonus payments or performance related payments, right? So that means it will create some pressure to the financial control to do this. So it will create some intimidation threat, right? And because of this threat, what are the fundamental principles here we have to breach? One is integrity, right? Because if you are following the intimidation, if you are going with the because of the intimidation threat, right? You are going to make some adjustment to the financial statements. That means you are not working in a honest way, right? And also the objectivity, because of someone influence you, right? You are manipulating the financial information. So because of the intimidation trait, right? Your integrity and the objectivity fundamental principles has been breached, right? Has been breached, right? If you are doing this, right? So then, any other issues? Any other ethical considerations?
Yeah, it impact the professional competence also, no, sir? And due care.
Yes, but here they are not saying that she's going to apply this. What we have to do is the financial controller get the suggestion from the management or the directors. If she going to adjust this, so there will be a consideration regarding professional competence as well. And self-interest threat is there because she's having some self-interest regarding the company, right? If she adjusts these things, what will happen? The performance related bonus will be increased, right? And self-interest rate will be impacted to the objectivity fundamental principle, right? Right. And also some professional competency needs to be there, right? As you correctly mentioned, if she going to do these adjustments, right? Right. So these are the questions, these are the problems we are having. So first of all, if there is a this kind of question, so you need to identify what kind of issues there are in the case study, right? So then what we have to do, you need to provide the solution, right? What is the solution here? We are having different threats. So as a financial control, let's say you are the financial control. What kind of a solution you can have? What is the first solution you can have? So basically, when it's coming to the addressing the threat, there are three ways we can address the threat, right? When you're applying this to this scenario, what we can do? What is the first thing the director can do? Sorry, the financial control can do?
යාලට මේකින් එන මේ issue එක පොඩ්ඩක් පැහැදිලි කරොත්.
Expected to be honest and transparent. Sorry, I didn't get you. There are two students has been asked, right? Can you according to
this case study,
Okay.
as a chartered accountant,
Yeah.
she's expected to be honest and transparent,
Yeah.
and she should make sure that the financial statements are present, true, and fair view.
Okay, now directors are pushing her to do this, right? Directors are asking her to do this. So what kind of things you can do to safeguard you if you are a
She
financial
should
control?
have, she should have a courage to say no to them.
Uh,
If
the
the
first,
if they
in a kind of a
if the-
professional way, the courage is something like unprofessional. It's we can say courage. Yeah, we need to have courage, but in a professional way, how we can resolve this?
Can get advice from the auditors and give their opinion and convince management to not to follow these rules.
Okay, good. So as a first instance, what we can do is as a financial controller, you can explain the directors, right, about the requirement of the financial accounting standards. So you can say, director C, under the LKS 1 and LKS 7, we can't do this. Under the LKS 1, it says clearly you can't categorize the expenses under the extraordinary items. And also you can't put the assets and the property plant and equipment sales of property plant and equipment under the operational activities, right? So it is not allowed to do in the financial reporting requirements, right? Right? And she needs to perceive the, as you need to have a courage, very correctly, right? Perceive the directors that she can't do this, right? She can't amend the financial statements, right? That is the first thing you can do. සමහර ඩිරෙක්ටර්ස් දන්නේ නැතුව තමයි මේ කියන්න වෙන්න පුළුවන්, right? ඩිරෙක්ටර්ස් වලට ෆයිනෑන්ෂල් accounting පිළිබඳ knowledge එක නැති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ නිසා පළවෙනියම මුලින්ම කරන්න ඕන මොකද්ද? As a financial control, you need to elaborate, you need to explain. As a financial control, as a chartered accountant, you can't do this because of this, right? That is the first thing you have to do. Then again, directors are saying, no, that's not our problem. You have to do this if you want to be as a financial controller in this company, right? Right. So if the directors are not agree with your statements, right? What financial control should do in that
Yes,
such
so-
kind of a scenario?
Raise
Yeah.
to a audit committee.
she can escalate this issue to a audit committee or board, or even she might consider whistleblowing.
Yeah. So next step is so as a financial controller, you try to resolve this problem internally. So you need to look at the internal safeguards for that, right? So basically, what is the most so when you are looking at this three things, first thing is eliminate the circumstances creating the threat. That means if the director is having a different viewpoint, you need to explain the things to the director and change the viewpoint, right? But they are not agree with you, then what you have to do, you need to apply the safeguard which is available, right, within the business and when it's come to legalizations, right? So then what we can do as a financial control, you can explain this to, as you correctly mentioned, audit committee or the external auditors. You can say, you can get the advisors from the external auditors, internal auditors, or else you can inform it to the audit committee, right? So that is the second step you can do, right? You can follow the internal safeguards, right? Internal safeguards. And even you have followed the internal safeguard, let's say you are talk to auditors, you have informed to the audit committee, right? Right. Even you have talked to the audit committee directors, they are not listening to them. They also saying that you need to do this. So then what we can do? What we can do? You have to do this. Even the audit committee directors are saying, oh, that's fine. Make a වැඩි හිතන්න එපා කරලා දාන්න. Right. So then what we can do? Even the safeguard is not
Resigning.
Yes. Any other idea? Yes. Resigning. Okay. What she can do? Yes. One thing she can do is she can decline this proposal, right? Decline this engagement, or she can ultimately resign from the job, right? Right? Resigning from the job, right? You can resigning from the job, right? Right? Resigning from the job. Or if there is any kind of a legal things are available, right? The safeguard is available. That is the second thing you can go. But if it is not workable, afterward, what you can do is you can resign or decline the activity or decline the engagement, right? Right. So that is the third thing. Decline or resign from the engagement, right? Right. So that is how you need to approach such kind of a question, right? Approach a such kind of question, right? So let's look at the next one. Is it okay? Is it clear? Yeah, clear?
doubt එකක් තියෙනවා.
Sorry.
doubt එකක් තියෙනවා sir. දැන් ethics
Yeah.
කියන්නේ sir rule එකක්ද නැත්නම් ඒක නිකන් common generally accepted මේකක්ද මේක follow කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා තියෙන එකක්ද නැත්නම් ඒක rule එකක්ද?
Ethics මෙහෙමයි. Ethics කියන්නේ rule එකක් නෙවෙයි. මම කලින් කිව්වනේ ethics enforce කරන්නේ නැහැ rule laws වලින්. enforce කරනවා නම් rule එකක් වෙන්නේ. law එකකින් enforce කරනවා නම් තමයි rule එකක් වෙන්නේ. right? හැබැයි law එකේදී law එක ඇතුලේ ethics තියෙනවා. right? law එක ඇතුලේ ethics තියෙනවා. එතකොට දැන් අපි ගත්තොත් අපි දැන් කතා කරන්නේ professional accountant මොකද අපි professional background එකෙන් කතා කරන්නේ අපි management field එකේ අපි chartered accountant ගේ role එකෙන් තමයි අපි බලන්නේ මේ ethics කියන දේ. නැත්නම් අපේ ethics කියන එක ගත්තොත් එම ඒක widely impact වෙන එකක්. අපි ගත්තොත් එම නිකන් සාමාන්‍ය මිනිස්සුන්ටත් ethics තියෙනවා. right? personal ethics තියෙනවා. professional ethics තියෙනවා. එක professional වල ගත්තොත් එක වර්ගයේ ethics තියෙනවා. අපි දැන් මෙතන කතා කරන්නේ chartered accountant තියෙන ethics. ඒතකොට chartered accountant කෙනෙක්ට උනහම chartered accountant කෙනෙක් වුණාම ඔයා අනුගමනය කරන්න ඕනේ ethics තියෙනවා chartered institute එකෙන් issue කරලා. right? එතකොට ඒක kind of a rule. right? kind of a rule because it's a code of ethics. මේක ඔයා follow කරන්න ඕනේ ethically ඔයා මෙහෙම වෙන්න ඕනේ. ethical conduct එක තියෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒතකොට බැරි වෙලා හරි ඔයා මේක breach කරොත් right? chartered institute එකට පුළුවන් ඔයාට against වැඩ කරන්න. right? ඔයාට against legal actions ගන්න. right? එතකොට ethics follow කරන එක rule එකක් නෙමෙයි. හැබැයි ethics follow කරේ නැත්නම් ඔයාට legal actions ගන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද legal enforcement එකේ මේ ethics include වෙලා තියෙනවා. right? ethics follow කරන එක rule එකක් නෙමෙයි. So you have to follow the ethics but it's not a rule. So if you are breaching the rule, people can take actions against you because law includes the ethics. right? අර general law එකේ නෑ. හැබැයි ethics breach කරොත් යම්කිසි law enforcement එකක් ගේන්න පුළුවන්. right? right? තේරුණාද? එහෙනම් දැන් අපි ගත්තොත් එහෙම ඔයගොල්ලෝ ethical වෙන්න ඕනේ කියලා කියනවා. right? ethical මිනිස්සු වෙන්න ඕනේ. හැබැයි ඒක rule එකක් විදිහට තියෙන හැබැයි law එකේ මේ සමහර දේවල් තියෙනවා. හොරකම් කරන්න බෑ. හොරකම් කරොත් මෙහෙම වෙනවා. right? right? හොරකම් කරන්න බෑ. හොරකම් කරොත් මෙහෙම වෙනවා. හැබැයි ඔයා ethically ඔයා හොරකම් නොකර ඉන්නවා. හොරකම් කරොත් විතරයි යන law එකේ එන්නේ. right? හොරකම් කළොත් විතරයි law එකේ එන්නේ. right? ඒතර ethics අපිට අර මම කලින් කිව්වා වගේ concepts දෙකකට ethics බලන්න පුළුවන්. එකක් තමයි ethics අනිවාර්යෙන් තියෙන absolute universal truth. right? applicable to all of them. සමහර ethics තියෙනවා සමහර රටවල් වලට විතරයි apply වෙන්නේ. සමහර places වලට විතරයි apply වෙන්නේ. සමහර කාල වලට විතරයි apply වෙන්නේ. right? සමහර religions වලට විතරයි apply වෙන්නේ. right? සමහර cultures වලට විතරයි apply වෙන්නේ. ඒතර අපිට ethics කියන එක rule එකක් කියලා කියන්න බෑ. හැබැයි ethics කියන එක rule එකක් නෙමෙයි කියලා කියන්නත් බෑ සමහර වෙලාවට. ඒක depend on the situation. right? But we can say ethics are not enforced by the law, but in the law ethics has been included. right? clear?
ඔව් සර්. දැන් එතකොට දැන් එක්කෙනෙක් ජීවත් වෙන්න ඕන කමට බෙහෙත් හොරකම් කරනවා නම් එතකොට ඒක ethically right ද wrong ද?
ඒක based on the situation. ජීවත් වෙන්න ඕන කමට බෙහෙත් හොරකම් කරනවා නම් ethical ගත්තොත් ඒ කියන්නේ law එකේ පැත්තෙන් ගත්තොත් ඒක වැරදි. law එකේ පැත්තෙන් ගත්තොත් වැරදි. හැබැයි මිනිස්සුන්ගේ කල්චරල් බිහේවියර් එකේ ethics විදියට ගත්තොත් සමහර වෙලාවට ඒක හරියන්න පුළුවන්. depending on the situation. rule එක පැත්තෙන් වැරදි.
සර් හරි කියලා කියන්නේ ethics එකද law එකද?
හරි කියලා කියන්නේ ethics එක. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි generally acceptable මිනිස්සුන්ගේ ethics තමයි තියෙන්න ඕනේ. හරිද? law කියන්නේ අපිට push කරන එකන්නේ. ethically behave වෙන්න push කරන එක. ඒතකොට අපි ethically ජීවත් වෙන්න තමයි try කරන්නේ. law එකට ජීවත් වෙනවට වඩා ethically ජීවත් වෙන එක තමයි appropriate. right?
එතකොට සර් දැන් මේ case study එකට අනුව දැන් මේ වැඩේ මෙයා කරේ නෑ කියමු. එතකොට මේ වැඩේ කරේ නෑ. ප්‍රැක්ටිකලි මම නිකන් අහන්නේ මගේ ඩවුට් එකක්. එතකොට මේ වැඩේ මෙයා කරේ නෑ. එතකොට මෙයා කරේ නෑ කියවට පස්සේ දැන් මාකට් එකේ මෙයාලා මේ කියපු සයිඩ් ඉෆෙක්ට් එක වෙලා ඉන්වෙස්ටර්ස්ලා සල්ලි ටික ආයි ඉල්ලනවා. කම්පැනි එක බැංක්‍රප්සි වෙනවා. එතකොට දැන් 1500 ගාණක් මිනිස්සුන්ට ජොබ් නැති වෙනවා. නිකන් එක්සැම්පල් එකකට. එතකොට දැන් මේ වගේ වැඩේ කරේ නැති නිසා දැන් මෙච්චරක් මිනිස්සු පාරේ එන එක එතිකලි ඒක වැරදි වගේ නැද්ද? එතකොට දැන් අපි එතිකලි හරියට ඉන්න ඕන නම් ඒ දේ කරලා තිබ්බනම් දැන් මෙයාලට මෙහෙම වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එතකොට පොඩි එතන ඩිලෙමා එකක් වගේ නැද්ද?
ethical dilemma එකක්ද?
ඔව්.
ඔව් එහෙම කියන්න පුළුවන්. මෙහෙමයි දැන් මේකෙදී ඔයා ඒ කියන්නේ අර දැන් ඔය පටලගෙන තියෙන personal ethics එකනේ. දැන් අපි කතා කරන්නේ මෙතන professional ethics. right? personal ethics පැත්තෙන් අපිට හිතන්න පුළුවන් අපි මෙහෙම කරොත් එහෙම අපේ මෙච්චර මාත් එක්ක වැඩ කරොත් මිනිස්සුන්ට jobs නැති වෙනවා. ඒගොල්ලෝගේ ආර්ථිකය මෙහෙම කඩන් වැටෙනවා. right? That's a personal ethics. right? So here we are having a professional ethics. right? In the professional ethics, we need to follow the book. right? We have to follow the book. But when it comes to personal ethics, as you mentioned, if I'm only following the personal ethics, I can go with the personal ethics. ඔයා කියන විදිහට හිතන්න පුළුවන්. මම personally හිතනවා මේක කරේ නැත්තම් මෙන්න මෙහෙම මේ මිනිසුන්ට වෙයි. right? මගේ personal ethics breach වෙනවා කියලා මට හිතේ. right? හැබැයි මේ scenario එකේදී මේ financial accountant නැත්නම් financial controller ට තියෙනවා code of ethics. documented වෙච්ච ethics තියෙනවා follow කරන්න. right? document වෙච්ච ethics තියෙනවා. So she has to follow that. Because she's a chartered accountant. When she's performing his job, she's working in a capacity of a chartered accountant. So therefore, they will have a documented code of ethics, right? So there is requirement to follow. So therefore, she definitely needs to go with that ethics because she is a professional person who is she needs to comply with those professional ethics, right? Scenarios දෙකක්. right? එක්කෙනෙක්ට කියන්න පුළුවන් මම මස් කන එක වැරදි කියලා. තව එක්කෙනෙක්ට කියන්න පුළුවන්.
එතකොට සර් එතකොට දැන් ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් ethics කියන්නේ එතකොට දැන් රූල් එකක් වෙනවනේ සර්. එහෙම බැලුවොත්.
මෙහෙමයි ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් ethics කියන එක රූල් එකක් වෙනවා. ඔයාට legalize document එකක් තියෙනවා. එහෙම බලමු. ඔව් ඔයා කියන එක හරි. මෙහෙමයි රූල් එකක් වුණාම legal enforcement එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒකයි මම කියන්නේ. දැන් අපි ගත්තොත් එම code of ethics කියන එකට legal enforcement එකක් නැහැ පුතා. right? උදාහරණයක් විදිහට මම famous governor කෙනෙක් කියන ලංකාවේ. right? central bank governor කෙනෙක්. එතකොට එයා code of ethics breach කරා. CA ශ්‍රී ලංකාවල code of ethics breach කරා. right? එතකොට එයාට CA ශ්‍රී ලංකා legally මේව කරන්න බෑ. legal enforcement එකක් නැහැ. legal rule නැහැ. හැබැයි CA ශ්‍රී ලංකා කියන institute එක ඇතුලේ එයා rule එකට ඔබේ වෙලා නැහැ. ඒ කියන්නේ ethics එයා follow කරලා නැහැ. ඒ නිසා CA ශ්‍රී ලංකාගේ ඇතුලෙන් එයාට අවශ්‍ය punishment එක දෙනවා. right? එතකොට අපි legalize කියන එක හැමෝටම commonly බලපාන්න ඕන. legal වුණොත්. right? නීතියක් වුණොත් හැමෝටම common නේ. දැන් ලංකාවේ හැමෝටම මේ නීතිය තියෙන්න ඕන. right? හැබැයි මේක certain aspect එකකට විතරයි තියෙන්නේ. professional accountants වලට විතරයි මේ codes තියෙන්නේ. ඒගොල්ලෝ මේක follow කරේ නැත්නම් ඒගොල්ලන්ට punishments හම්බ වෙනවා ඒගොල්ලෝගේ ඇතුලේ. දැන් CA ශ්‍රී ලංකා එකට ඇතුලෙන් ඒගොල්ලන්ට punishments දෙන්න බැරි නම් ඒගොල්ලන්ට පුළුවන් evidence collect කරලා එළියට යන්න. නඩු කියන්නේ. ඒක කරන්නේ මේ professional institute එක. right? ඒකයි මම කියන්නේ ඒක rule එකක් නෙමෙයි. institute එක ඇතුළේ rule එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක law එකක් නෙමෙයි. rule එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන් law එකක් නෙමෙයි. ඒ law එකක් වෙනවනේ ඒක commonly හැමෝටම applicable වෙන්න. common person කෙනෙක්ටම apply වෙන්න. right? clear? ඔයාගේ doubt එක හොඳයි. good. So you have mixed up with the professional ethics and the personal ethics. That's good. Your concern is correct. That's why when it comes to ethics, it's very difficult to elaborate. Right? Ethics කියන්නේ අපි හරි දේ කරන එක ඇත්තටම සරලව ගත්තොත්. ඒක professional ද personal නෙමෙයි. හරි කියලා හිතන දේ කරන එක. ඔයාට හරි කියලා feel වෙන එක ඔයා කරන එක තමයි ethics කියන්නේ. ethically ඔයා behave වෙනවා කියන්නේ. එතකොට ඒක සමහර වෙලාවට අපිට document කරලා තියෙනවා නම් ඔයා මේ විදිහට හැසිරෙන්න කියලා ඔයා ඒ විදිහට හැසිරෙන්න තු වෙන විදිහට හැසිරුණොත් ඒක වැරදින්න පුළුවන්. ethical නැති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි ඔයාගේ personal thinking එක ethical වෙන්න පුළුවන්. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට ඔයා බොරු කියනවා. right? බොරු කියන එක system එකට අනුව වැරදි. right? system එක අනුව බොරු කියන්න බෑ. මං කිව්වේ බොරු කියන්න බෑ. හැබැයි ඔයා බොරු කියනවා කාට හරි හොඳක් වෙන්න. right? So then you feel in a personal way it's ethical. right? right? ඒ විදිහට අපිට කන්සිඩර් කරන්න පුළුවන්. right? හැබැයි මේ කේස් එකේදී අපි බලන්න ඕනේ ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් වේ එකෙන්. right? මේ වගේ කේස් ස්ටඩි එකකට අපි බලන්න ඕනේ ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් thinking එකෙන් not in the personal way. right? එතකොට දැන් මේ වගේ කේස් එකක් අපි හිතමු බොරු කියනවා කියලා. බොරු කියන එක පොතේ හැටියට වැරදි. right? එතකොට අපි යන්න ඕනේ මේ පොතේ හැටියට. right? බොරු කියන එක පොතේ හැටියට. ඒකෙන් මිනිස්සුන්ව ආරක්ෂා වෙනවද නැද්ද? ඒක ethical personal ethics විදිහට ඒක හරි වෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි බොරු කියන එක system එකේ විදිහට වැරදි. right? system එකේ විදිහට වැරදි. right? clear?
ඔව්
Is it clear?
තේරුණා. අවුලක් නෑ සර් අවුලක් නෑ. ඒකවල ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් ethics කියලා කියන්නේ මේක තමයි හරි දේ කියලා එයාලා කියලා තියෙන දේ අපි follow කරන්න ඕනේ.
yes. ඒගොල්ලෝ එක කරන්නේ public interest එක review කරලා. That's why I have discussed about the content of the ethics. right? මේ තියෙන content එක steps public interest එක බලලා තමයි ඒගොල්ලෝ fundamental principles හදන්නේ. right? public interest එකට තමයි fundamental interest හදන්නේ. එතකොට ඔයා professional work එකක් කරද්දී හැම වෙලේම ඔයාගේ professional work එකේ මිනිස්සු බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන දේ achieve වෙන්න. public interest එක achieve වෙන්න ඕන. ඒ achieve වෙන්න තමයි මේ principles build up කරලා තියෙන්නේ. right? general public ලගේ interest එක achieve වෙන විදිහ තමයි fundamental principles එක build up කරලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ general public ලා බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන අපි සරලව ගත්තොත් ඔයා බොරු කියන්නේ නැතුව ඉන්නේ. බොරු මොන හේතුවක් මතවත් බොරු කියන්නේ නැතුව ඉන්න එක general public believe කරනවා. ඒක තමයි public interest එක. දැන් ඔයා කිව්වා වගේ ඔයා හිතනවා නම් ඔයා මේක දෙක කරේ නැත්තම් මිනිස්සු 1500ක jobs නැති වෙනවා කියලා. අනික් පැත්තෙන් තව එක්කෙනෙක්ට කියන්න පුළුවන් ඔයා මේක කරොත් එහෙම මේ financial informations දිහා බලලා තීරණ ගන්න මිනිස්සුන්ගේ economic decisions වර්ධිනවා. ඒක අනික් පැත්තෙන් ගත්තොත් එහෙම මුළු රටේම economic decisions වලට බලපාන. ඒතකොට ඒක අර 1500ට වඩා මුළු ලංකාවටම බලපාන. එතකොට public interest එක වැඩිපුර තියෙන විදිහට තමයි මේ fundamental principles හදලා තියෙන්නේ. right? right? clear? is it clear?
තේරුණා.
right.
ඔව් සර්.
all right. great. thank
එතකොට
you.
ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් පර්සනල් කියලා මේ දෙකක් වෙනම තියෙනවා ethics.
yes definitely.
ඔයාට
ඔයාට
personal
තියෙන්න පුළුවන්
setting එකේදී අපේ personal
ඔයාට personal ethics තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි ඔයා profession එකක් කරනවා නම් you have to follow the professional ethics. right? even though you are having a personal ethics. මොකද professional ethics build up වෙලා තියෙන්නේ public interest එක base කරලා. public ලා හිතන්නේ මේ profession එකෙන් අපි මොනවද බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ ඒ මත තමයි මේ professional ethics build up වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. so then you have to follow that. right? even though you are having a personal ethics. right? clear?
එතකොට සර් දැන් මෙයාලා අපිව මේක කරේ නැත්තම් මරනවා කිව්වොත් අපි මොනවද කරන්නේ?
එහෙම කියන්න බෑ. ඒක law එකක්
ඔව් ලෝ එකට බෑ. ඒත් එයාලා කරාට පස්සේ ඉතින් අපි එතන නෑ නේද?
මොකද්ද?
එයාලා ඒක කිව්ව දේ ඉතින් අපි කරේ නෑ. මෙයාලා ඔඩිට් කමිටි එකට ගිහිල්ලා දැන් මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ එළියට ඇවිල්ලා ඒක ලොකු ප්‍රශ්නයක් වුණා. දැන් එයාලා අපි පැත්තේ මොනවාරි සිවිය වැඩක් කරොත් එතකොට මොනවද සර් වෙන්නේ? ethical follow කරපුව අපි නෑනේ.
ඒ කියන්නේ ඔයා ethically ගිහිල්ලා professional ethics follow කරලා ගියාට පස්සේ audit committee එකේ director කියනවා මරනවා කියලා එහෙම.
ඔව් දැන් කට්ටිය කියනවා අපිව මරනවා මේ වගේ වැඩ එළියට ගිහිල්ලා. එතකොට දැන් පබ්ලික් තනනවා දැන් මේ වගේ ඩිරෙක්ටර්ස්ලා කම්පැනි එක මේව කරන්න යනවා කියලා එයාලගේ ජොබ්ස් නැති වෙලා එහෙම වෙනවා කියමුකෝ. එහෙම වුණාට පස්සේ එයාලා අපිව මැරුණොත් මොනවද වෙන්නේ?
ඒ කියන්නේ ඔයා මේ professional courts විදිහට වැඩ කළා. එහෙම වෙන්න බෑනේ. එහෙම වුණොත් legal actions ගන්න වෙනවා. එහෙම දැන් එහෙම කරොත් මේ මුකුත් profession එකක් කරන්න බෑනේ පුතා. දැන් ඔයා ඔඩිට් කරන්න යනවා කම්පැනි එක. ඊට පස්සේ ඔඩිට් කරන්න ගිහිල්ලා ඒ කම්පැනි එකේ තියෙන ෆ්‍රෝඩ් එකක් හොයා ගන්නවා. ෆ්‍රෝඩ් එකක් හොයාගත්තට පස්සේ ඔයා ඒක කිව්වොත් ඔයා මරනවා කියලා කියනවා. රයිට්? ඔයා රිවීල් කරොත් ඒක මරනවා කියලා කියනවා. ඒතකොට ඔයාගේ ප්‍රොෆෙෂනල් වර්ක් එක ඔයා කරලා නැහැ. ඔයා ඩියුකියාගෙන් වැඩ කරලා නැහැ. ඔයා ෆන්ඩමෙන්ටල් ප්‍රින්සිපල් එකක් කඩලා තියෙනවා. මිනිස්සු බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඒතකොට ඔයා වැරදි. ඒ වගේ එකක් ගියොත් මේක සිවිල් කේස් එකක් නේ. ඔයා මරන්න આવොත් මේක නඩු සිවිල් කේස් එකක්. රයිට්? මරනවා කිව්වොත්. ඒක එතික්ස් එක්ක ගෑවෙන්නේ ඒක සිවිල් කේස් එක. මරන්න આવොත් ඔයාට කම්ප්ලේන්ට් කරන්න පුළුවන්. රයිට්?
ඒක අන්තිම ප්‍රශ්නේ එහෙම තමයි සර් ගණන් ගන්න එපා ඒක. මගේ
right, okay. No issue. Good. All right. Yeah, any other questions? All right. So if you don't have any questions, so I'm moving on to the last question, right? It's a classroom discussion. Actually, it's a, I will give you it as a homework, right? So I will make a Dropbox, right? I have made 3 Dropboxes now, right? So I saw some of you have upload the answers. So I will pick the good answers and I will put it into the LMS again, right? So then you can review those answers, right? So I will just read the question. Vagisha is a recently qualified chartered accountant. He's Vagisha, sorry. He's the audit manager in the charge of the financial statement audit of Sunshine Real Estate Residencies Private Limited. During the audit, Vagisha and his team discovered that the management of the SRERL is engaged in a fraudulent accounting practices. He is concerned that if they report the fraud, the company will be forced to file for the bankruptcy and many people will lose their jobs. However, he also knows that they have a professional obligation to report the fraud. So now your concern is coming up in this question. Advise Vagisha on the action he should take regarding the ethical issues arising from the facts given above in relation to key fundamental ethical principles, right? So what you have to do as a homework, so you have to do this, and the next week I will discuss this in the class, right? I'll ask you to present your answers. So then I will discuss with the correct answer or the suggested answer, right? The concern raised by your colleagues is there, right? The personal ethics and the professional ethics has been kind of a conflict here, right? So what, as a professional accountant, you need to follow the guidelines. As a person, you need to follow the personal ethics. So there will be some conflict in this question. So what you have to do is you need to analyze this and you need to provide the answer, right? You need to provide the answer, right? Right. So today let's wind up the session. So any questions you are having? Because I have to go to the SAP, so it will take 30 to 40 minutes. Yes, any questions?
No, sir, fine.
All fine. All right. Others? Good to go, right? All right. So next week I will start from this point, okay? I will start from this classroom discussion and you better to come up with the answers. So then you can present your answers to the class, right? All right. So thank you very much for joining. So have a good day. So I will share the QR code. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.